Hello and welcome back to another vlog. In this video, we are going to be taking a cruise along the City of London via the Thames River. The cruise is with a company called City Cruises, and I'll leave a link in the description below if you'd like to book a similar adventure with them. Generally, prices for the cruise are quite reasonable, and you learn a lot of interesting facts and the history behind the famous landmarks of London. We used the boarding point of Westminster Pier, which is about a 2-minute walk from the Westminster tube station. We got there around midday, but there are several sailings throughout the day if you prefer to use the service earlier or even later in the day. You can also use other pier points such as the London Eye, Tower Bridge, or Greenwich piers if they're more convenient for you. The boat ride for us was basically along the River Thames, travelling eastwards from Westminster in central London towards Greenwich in southeast London. The first stop for us was the London Eye, which is just on the opposite side of the river, and it was just a brief stop here for a few minutes just to pick up a few more travellers from the pier as we head along the River Thames. Looking across from the London Eye, you do get a great view of the Houses of Parliament, as well as the vibes of the South Bank. So, over to the unofficial guide of City Cruises, who will give us a lot more information about the sights that we're going to see along the River Thames.
The Festival of Great Britain, which took place in 1951. Inside is a theatre with world-class acoustics and some of the best performers of all time at the Royal Festival Hall. The likes of Pavarotti, Michael Jackson, Amy Winehouse, and old Blue Eyes himself, Frank Sinatra, has performed there. It's part of the South Bank. The South Bank is on your right, and we will be following the South Bank as we head downriver. Lots to see and do on your right-hand side. It's an arts and cultural hub for the city, and I will point a few things out to you on your right-hand side as we head down. The next bridge, Waterloo Road Bridge. Now, named after the Battle of Waterloo, it's the second bridge to stand on this site. The one you see today, reconstruction started in 1939. Now, with the outbreak of the Second World War, a lot of the men constructing this bridge were sent off to fight. So the bridge was completed by the ladies of London. And on the river, it is known as the Ladies' Bridge. So an almost entirely female workforce built this bridge. Good fact for you. It remains the only bridge in London to have been built on time and under budget. So well done, ladies.
That's it, still there. I don't
Now back on your south bank, on your right hand side. That great building with the electronic advertisement board, that's our National Theatre. Now it will not surprise you to hear, it gets voted the ugliest building on the river every single year. And that's because it looks more like a car park than a theatre. In fact, King Charles III himself described that building as a monstrous carbuncle. Take it from me, that's not good. Don't judge a book by its cover though, guys. There are 3 theatres inside, one of which being the Olivier Theatre. That's named after Laurence Olivier, and it actually hosts some of the best shows in London. So that's our National Theatre. A little bit about the river. So the length of the Thames is 215 miles from source to mouth. Now 90 miles of the River Thames is tidal. And where we are in central London is part of that tidal section. We see a very large tide range in central London. So between high and low water, there's a rise and fall in the water level of about 7.5 metres. Okay, very good tide range. If you look at the wall either side of the boat, towards the top of the wall, you'll see a dark greenish line. That is your high water mark. We are currently experiencing a flood tide. So water is rushing in at the moment from the North Sea, which is ahead of us, and we are heading towards high water at the moment. Now the tide extends to a town to the west of London called Teddington. Teddington actually means tide ending town, Teddington. Just on your left-hand side, we're passing the HQS Wellington. She's a former New Zealand naval sloop on your left. Now, at the back of the boat, stern of the boat, just coming into view, there's an archway on the embankment wall. That is called Temple Arch, and it is a boundary marker. That is the boundary between the city of Westminster that we have just left and the city of London we've just entered. Now, the city of London stretches from here to Tower Bridge, where we're going. It's only 1 square mile in size, and it has a population of about 10,000 people. The city of London is one of the smallest cities in the United Kingdom. Now, when you're thinking of London, you're actually thinking of Greater London. That comprises of 32 different boroughs, the city of London itself, and has a population close to 10 million. So there is a very big difference, but we are in the city now itself. Just on your right hand side, this red brick building here to your right, that's the OXO building. Now if you've got any Brits on board, you'll recognise that brand. Yeah, that's the OXO stock cube they used to make over there. Very famous brand in the UK. No longer. It's a common theme on the river. All these old industrial buildings, warehouses and wharves have all been converted into totally unaffordable riverside. So that building on your right, at the bottom, luxury shops, in the middle, multi-million pound apartments, and at the top, the Harvey Nichols restaurant. Now if you went for dinner there this evening, you'd have to remortgage your house. It's not cheap. It does come in the top 5 restaurants in London though, so they're doing something right. But if you come down to Greenwich with us, you'll see a lot of these old warehouses which have been converted into property today. I'm just going to point this out really quickly on your left here. This construction site to your left is where they are building London's new super sewer. It's to replace the old Victorian sewage system, which was built after the Great Stink of 1858. So we need it. It's costing around £5 billion, due to be completed in 2025. 2 bridges ahead of you. These are the Blackfriars bridges. The first one is a road bridge, and if you look at the pillars on this road bridge, they were designed to look like church pulpits, and that's because there used to be a monastery on the north bank on your left-hand side. Now, we are supposed to navigate under this archway because we're on the starboard side of the channel, the right-hand side of the channel. But when it's high water, in a couple of hours' time, about 2 o'clock, we will not be able to get under this archway. So sometimes we have to navigate through the archway in the middle. So you can see how much we've still got to go with the incoming flow. Now these red pillars are the foundations of the original railway bridge at Blackfriars, so we're about to go under today's railway bridge. This is actually a train station above here. Blackfriars Station is on this bridge. Now the station above us was designed and constructed to accommodate more people coming to London for the Olympics, so back in 2012. The only problem is they completed construction in 2013, so they totally missed it. Nice job, eh? Now you get a nice view, guys, from the river. On your left-hand side, you can see the dome to St Paul's Cathedral to your left. Now that is Christopher Wren's masterpiece. The cathedral was opened to the public in 1709. It was actually reconstructed after the Great Fire of London, which took place in 1666. Now the cathedral stands at 365 feet tall. It was the tallest building in London up until the 1960s. And that's because there were restrictions. They weren't allowed to build anything taller than St Paul's Cathedral up until the 60s. And if you look around the cathedral today, you'll see there is still no high-rise, so we still get a nice view of the cathedral. Now a little tip for you, St Paul's is a brilliant place to go and visit. It's about 25 quid to get in. So here's a tip for you, go on a Sunday, they'll let you in for free. It's a church. They do a church service. The only thing is they will have someone going around with a collection bucket, of course. But there we are. Now you get a nice photo opportunity in a minute. When we go under the Millennium Footbridge, if you have a look to your left, what you'll notice is the bridge was built perfectly in line with St Paul's Cathedral to your left. Just stepping back in here, it's getting a bit windy here, don't we? We're in the sound. There we are. Now, have we got any Shakespeare fans on board? Yeah? Well, have a look on your right-hand side. You'll see a white round building with a thatched roof. That is a replica to William Shakespeare's Globe Theatre on the right-hand side at Bankside. It's built in the same style as the original playhouse, which burnt down in 1613. And any performance there today is done in the traditional style, so no lighting or sound effects. Now, if you went to see a performance at the Globe Theatre during Shakespeare's time, to get yourself a ticket in the cheap standing section, it cost you 1 penny. Now, what they used to do, to collect the money, they used to go round the theatre and collect it in a box. At the end of the performance, they took the box to the box office where they counted it, and that's where we get the saying today, box office from. It's from the old theatres in Southwark on your right-hand side. So that is the London Borough of Southwark to your right, the City of London's on your left, and this is Southwark Bridge we're about to go under. Now this is the quietest bridge in London, and that's because it's really hard to find. There are lots of one-way streets that lead to this bridge. It's very confusing. So if you see anyone walking across this bridge, give them a wave. They're lost. See, no one there. It's quite a nice afternoon. Some of you might be thinking, let's find a nice pub and a nice beer garden. Well, there's a lovely pub coming up on the right-hand side of the boat. It's called the Anchor. It's got red windows. The lights outside. It already looks like it's filling out there. Now the Anchor Tavern on your right hand side is one of the oldest pubs on the river. There's been a tavern there for over 400 years. Some very famous people have had a drink there. Samuel Pepys the diarist, William Shakespeare and his actors, and the captains and myself. In fact, that's where you'll find us this evening, after work. That's for research purposes, of course. Yeah, for these guys, we have to do our research. Sometimes we do so much research in the Anchor, we forget the next day what we researched the night before. We have to go again. So we're about to go on the Cannon Street Bridge here. I was telling you about the warehouses earlier as we passed the Oxo building. Well, coming up on the right-hand side, there's a nice example of some of the old warehouses. You've got Winchester Wharves, Horseshoe Wharf, Pickford's Wharf. Now, London was the busiest port in the world for over 300 years, from the 16th century onwards. Warehouses like these lined the banks of the river for up to 10 miles. So ships came from all over the world to trade here. Talking of ships, have a look on your right. There's, in that dry dock, a pirate ship on your right-hand side. Anyone seen Pirates of the Caribbean? Yeah? That's got nothing to do with it. That's a replica to Sir Francis Drake's Golden Hind. He was a privateer in the time of Elizabeth I, and he was the first Englishman to circumnavigate the world. It is said when he returned to London from that voyage around the world, he brought back so much stolen gold from the Spanish that he cleared this country's national debt for the first and last time. This bridge, you'll all have heard of this one. This is one of the most famous bridges in the world. It's the one that keeps falling down. London Bridge, guys, this is it. If you don't believe me, they've written it on the side. Now, several bridges have spanned this section. The first to build one here were the Romans over 2,000 years ago. Now, the most famous London Bridge was the old medieval bridge. That was built in the 12th century and it spanned the river for 600 years. It was considered a wonder of the world. And if you look on the left, there's a gap in the buildings on your left. That's where the medieval bridge actually crossed the river from. In that gap is a church called St Magnus the Martyr. Now, if you're interested, if you go into that church, they've actually got a scale replica model of the old London Bridge. Above you on your right-hand side, the Shard. That's the UK's tallest building, standing at 310 metres. Inside, it's got a 5-star hotel, the Shangri-La, bars, restaurants, apartments in the Shard are valued between 30 and 50 million pounds. There's a viewing platform at the top as well. Now, amazing views. It's about 30 quid to go up. So another tip for you, on your left, the building with the crane at the top, it sort of gets wider as it goes up. That's 20 Fenchurch Street, otherwise known as the walkie-talkie. At the top of that bit, I can see people up there right now. That's a Sky Guard, and it is actually totally free to go up. It can be popular, so you might have to book, but free to go up. And those buildings on your left, that is the City of London skyline over there. and it's one of Europe's largest financial districts. Buildings on the left-hand side include the gherkin, the scalpel, the cheese grater, the can of ham, and as I just mentioned, the walkie-talkie. Now, just staying on your left, guys, this white building on the riverfront, it's got 6 black chimneys on its roof in the middle. That's Waterguard House. Now, anything illegally bought into the UK, that could be drugs, alcohol, tobacco, take it to that building on your left. They store it in the basement for up to 1 year, and then they incinerate it, hence the chimneys on its roof. But I've never seen any smoke coming out of those chimneys. We do hear they have pretty good Christmas parties. Now, you might have to strain your eyes to see it, because on the right-hand side it is camouflage. But if you look hard enough, you might see a warship. Oh, there it is. Yeah, that's HMS Belfast. She was built in the same shipyard as the Titanic and first saw action in the Second World War. She's a brilliant museum today. If you're into your naval history, this is one for you, okay? It's part of the Imperial War Museum here in London. Now, our stop's on the left, Tower Millennium Pier, but we are going to get you closer to Tower Bridge, guys. So don't panic, you'll get some nice photo opportunities. Just a reminder to try and stay seated, guys. And if they don't understand, just if there's a guide with you, just try and stay seated, because we will get you some nice photos, we promise. But also, if you are standing, it does tend to block your fellow passengers' views. Okay, so do try to stay seated for us. When we turn in a minute, the boat's quite likely to rock a little bit, okay, so please be very careful. Tower Bridge. The bridge is unique. It is a twin steel suspension and bascule bridge. So the bascules are the centre parts which rise to allow taller ships into the city. Only one day of the year this bridge won't open. It's the day of the London Marathon, because we have 50,000 people running across it. Personally, I think a little bit of a gap might make it more interesting. Maybe that's me. So we're going to start turning, folks. Just a reminder, guys, do try stay seated. I know it's difficult. It is difficult, isn't it?
It's the Tower Bridge.
So the towers were built in 1894. They were built in the Gothic style to be in keeping with the Tower of London. I'll tell you about that in a minute. If you took down all the stonework on this bridge, it would remain standing, okay? It's just there for aesthetics. Another way to see the bridge, if you look at the walkways at the top, you can go up there, and you might notice in the middle there's a glass floor, so you might need a very good head for heights for that one. Personally, I think this is the best way to see the bridge. Little story for you, okay? December 1952, a very foggy day here in London, and a bus driver called Albert Gunter, going about his day. He was driving south across the bridge. When he got to the middle, the bascules were opening. He noticed this through the fog. There was about a 3-foot gap. Now, at this point, what any normal person would do is put their foot on the brakes. Albert did not do that. He accelerated. He jumped Tower Bridge. That is a true story. Now, he was given a medal for his bravery. He was also given a £10 bonus, and apparently most of that went on his dry cleaning bill. I think if you did it today, you'd get the sack, wouldn't you? You'd probably end up in prison as well, but anyway. Talking of prisons, there's a very famous one coming up on your left-hand side. So the Tower of London, a lot of history in this building. So the centre part with the 4 turrets is the White Tower, built in the 1070s during the reign of William the Conqueror. Nearly 1,000 years of history in that building. Now, it's had a lot of functions during its lifetime. It's been a fortress, a royal palace. It's even been a zoo. But most famously, the Tower of London has been a place of imprisonment, torture, and execution. If you look on the wall on your left, you'll see the words "Entry to the Traitor's Gate." That was dubbed London's first one-way street. If you'd been found guilty of treason and they sentenced you to death, they'd have rowed you down the river from Westminster, so the exact journey you've just done. The only difference being, of course, they probably wouldn't have had a commentary. They'd have taken you through that gate on your left. You'd have spent your last night on earth in the tower. The next day, they'd have taken you up to Tower Hill, and in front of a crowd of thousands of people, they'd have removed your head from your body. They would have placed it in boiling tar to preserve it. They would have put it on a spike and then displayed your head on the old London Bridge. We don't do that anymore. We believe in rehabilitation today. We actually give them 3 square meals and a PlayStation instead now. There's justice for you, isn't it? Amazing, but if you get a chance, guys, the Tower of London is an incredible place. It took place for many years. Now, we were doing a commentary on the way down from Westminster. Would people like me to continue on the way to Greenwich? Don't all shout at once. All right. Now, it's obviously a bit different. In the city, we've got all those landmarks to talk about. A lot of history down here, though. I think you'll find it quite interesting. There's some good stories. Now, you'll see a lot of the old warehouses I was telling you about on this stretch. And a good example of some of the old warehouses are on your right-hand side. This is Butler's Wharf. This is where all the tea and spice came to from around the British Empire. So ships would have come from places like China and India to offload their cargo at these warehouses. It would have been packed and then transported around the country. Now, with the advent of containerisation, ships grew in size quite dramatically, and it made them unable. They were unable to make their way up the River Thames to navigate safely through the river, and it made a lot of these warehouses redundant. But don't worry, they found a new lease of life. As I said earlier, they have been converted into totally unaffordable apartments. Yeah, multi-million-pound apartments these days. Give those boys a wave. They work hard for about 5 minutes. So the area on your right-hand side is called Bermondsey, and it's been gentrified today. It was a very poor part of the city in the 1800s. Now there's a dock that's going to come into view in a minute on your right-hand side. It's called St Saviour's Dock. It's got a little silver bridge across it on the right-hand side. So you can see the entrance there. And some of you might recognise this. It was used in the filming of the musical film Oliver. So that's where they filmed it, just up there on the right. So it hasn't really changed much since then, except there's one silly modern building they put in that you'll see. But they also did a James Bond movie. James Bond shot there in a rib, and he ended up down in Greenwich. Now I can tell you for a fact that's impossible. Can't do that. I'm going to try it. At the end of St Saviour's Dock is a place called Jacob's Island. Now that was a notorious slum in the 1800s, and that is where Charles Dickens actually based the novel Oliver Twist on. These barges on your right side, this is called Dowlin's Road, and people live on those barges, and you might be wondering, why are there trees growing on them? Well, that's because there's a little bylaw that predates the Port of London Authority. It states if you live on your barge there and you grow a tree on it, you can live there rent-free. So they do. Yeah, you would, wouldn't you? And you get a pretty good view as well. Talking of that view, have a look behind you if you're on the top deck, guys, because that is one of my favourite views of London. I'll go through what we've got there. So, sweeping from right to left, you've got the City of London. I was telling you about some of those buildings earlier, the walkie-talkie, the gherkin, for example. And then, of course, we've got Tower Bridge. If you look through Tower Bridge, we can see the monument to the Great Fire. You can see Billingsgate Market, St Paul's Cathedral. Look at that, the captain's position, that beautifully in the middle for you. A nice red bus going across as well. And then you've got the Belfast, London Bridge, Cannon Street Station in the view. You can also see the BT Tower, that's way off in the West End. And then off to the left, we've got Butler's Wharf and the Shard. So, for me, that is a little snapshot of modern day London, right behind the boat. Now, the man that carried out the sentence was called Hanging Judge Jeffreys, and what he used to do, when he tied them up over there, he used to row across the river, and he sat in that pub there, the Angel. He sat on that balcony, and he had a beer whilst they drowned. What a nice man. Now, piracy was a big problem on the river in sort of the late 1600s, early 1700s. As I said earlier, it was the busiest port in the world. Ships would have been lined up 6, 7, 8 ships abreast trying to get into the docks. So piracy flourished, and what they did was create a police force to combat that. They exist today. They're on your left. That is the Wapping River Police we're about to pass, and they are believed to be the oldest uniformed police service in the world. Now, a very famous pirate was executed there in 1701. His name was Captain Kidd, originally from Scotland, Captain William Kidd. And if you look on the left, they've actually named a pub after him, St John's Wharf, the Captain Kidd pub. There it is on your left. Now, he was so famous, or infamous I should say, at the time of his execution. When they executed him at Wapping, they took his body down, they took it out into the estuary, and they strung it up there as a warning to other pirates: do not come to London, this is your fate. On a lighter note, they do cheap beer in that pub. It's about £4 a pint. Have you got any Americans on board? I've got a bit of American history for you guys, okay? So the area of London on your right is called Rotherhithe. And there's a pub that's going to come into view in a minute. It's just next to the building with the scaffolding. You can see on the balcony the Stars and Stripes and the Union flag. Now the pub's called the Mayflower. It's from this site that the Mayflower vessel left to America with the Pilgrim Fathers. Yeah. If you look at the top of the pub, there's a little weather vane there with a scale replica model of the ship. A lot of the crew were from Rotherhithe. The captain of the vessel is actually buried in the graveyard just behind the pub. So a lot of Americans, when they come over to London, they like to go and visit the pub because it's got all the names of the people that travelled on the boat. They're inscribed on the wall, so they're trying to trace their ancestry. It's also it's got a licence to sell American stamps as well in the boat. There you go. Now, a lot of these buildings you see are original warehouses. They have been converted into property today. But some of the buildings are more modern, and the way to tell, a modern building will have a road or a pathway in front of it, whereas an old warehouse will tend to come right up to the riverfront. So, good examples of some of the old warehouses. On your left, you've got New Crane Wharf and Metropolitan Wharf over there with the old Derrick cranes there. The word wharf is actually an acronym. It stands for Warehouse at River Front. There you go. Did anyone know that? No. I'm not surprised. Absolute rubbish. It's a Flemish word. Sounds good, doesn't it? You're not going to believe a word I say. Now, staying on your left there, you can see that little white building with a willow tree next to it. That's another pub. It's called Prospect Whitby, and that is the oldest pub on the river. It dates back to 1520. It actually used to be called the Pelican, but it had a nickname as well. It was called the Devil's Tavern because a lot of London's criminals used to drink in there, pirates and smugglers. Now, it got a reputation as well through what is known as the press ganging of the Royal Navy. So what would have happened there? People would have been lured into the pub under the promise of cheap beer. And what the press gangers of the Navy did was they would have dropped a king's shilling, a coin, into your drink. If you drunk from it and the shilling touched your lip, you just signed yourself up to the Royal Navy. Yeah, it was as good as a contract, you just kissed the king. So the next day, you'd have woken up with a headache and a career in the Royal Navy you did not want. That's also where we get the saying bottoms up from, just to check if anyone's dropped a coin. We slowed down here a little bit. I mentioned the sewage system they're building earlier. That's another one of the construction sites over on your left, and they're working right on the riverfront there. So we do tend to slow down at this point for those guys. But that site over there is known as Free Trade Wharf, and it got the name Free Trade Wharf during the time of the plague here in London. During that time, only one country would actually trade with the city out of fear of getting the plague. That was the Dutch, and that's where they came, and they were offered free trade within the city. So it got called Free Trade Wharf. But it's actually where we fought to get the same Dutch courage from, because they were the only ones actually brave enough to risk coming up the river. So we're travelling through the east end of London right now. So this was much the poorer side of the city in the 1800s, the Victorian era. That's actually quite common in UK cities during that industrial revolution for the poorer side to have developed to the east. And that's because we experienced southwesterly prevailing winds here. So for the majority of the time, any pollution that was created in the city would have been dragged out to the east. So the wealthy side of the city tends to develop to the west in the clearer air. That is certainly the case here in London. Just just slowing down for those guys. There we are. Now, on your left-hand side is a part of London known as Whitechapel. Who's heard of Whitechapel? Yeah, that is where the infamous Jack the Ripper murders took place on your left-hand side. Britain's first serial killer, the mystery of Jack the Ripper. Now, if you're into that sort of history, they do some really good walking tours. So you can actually go and visit all the old murder sites. They even get holograms up of the victims if you fancy doing something like that. There you go. So that's Whitechapel in the distance on your left. Now you might have noticed I do like to mention pubs. Don't get the wrong idea. There's some very nice pubs on the river. I've got another one. I've got two more for you actually. On your left, there's a building with a black conservatory around it. That's called the Narrow. That's owned by a celebrity chef. You'll all have heard of him. It's got a very foul mouth. Ramsay. Yeah, he owns that place. You might hear of it in a minute. Just next to it, you can see that black and white bridge. That's Limehouse Marina in there. Now, that was the entrance, no, it is the entrance to a vast network of canal systems which stretch around Britain. That really helped fuel the Industrial Revolution on this island, before we had the railways, of course. So that side there, you've got the Regent's Canal and the Grand Union Canal. Now the Grand Union Canal goes from there up to Birmingham. You can actually go on up to Manchester as well. Primarily what they brought down from the Midlands of England to London during that time would have been coal during the Industrial Revolution. Right, one more pub, last one. It's on the left again. It's quite a narrow building. It's got a wooden staircase, white face to it there. It's called the Thames. Now this is also owned by a celebrity. It's owned by Sir Ian McKellen. If you don't know who that is, you probably know who Gandalf is. Yeah, Gandalf owns that one. He lives a few doors down. I can't tell you which house it is, obviously. I will tell you though, he likes yellow statues. Don't go knocking at his door. So he bought the pub, apparently it was closing down, it was his local pub, he saved it. I have heard he runs a pub quiz there on a Wednesday. Gandalf's staff from the movies is behind the bar, and there's a little room at the top of the pub. Charles Dickens rented that room, and he wrote two of his novels in there, Great Expectations and Our Mutual Friends. So ahead of us, this is Canary Wharf we are approaching, where you see these tall buildings. Now, when it was a trading wharf, trade from the Canary Islands came here, hence the name. Now, in the sort of 1970s, 1980s, this was a really run-down industrial part of the city around the old docks here. So what they did was start a regeneration programme, and that's when all these buildings you see today, they started getting constructed around that time. The oldest of which is the one with the pyramid on the top. That is number 1 Canada Square. Now, it's a nice place to visit, Canary Wharf, but I would say come at the weekend, because during the week that is home to around 100,000 bankers. Yeah, so to avoid them, come at the weekend. But around all the old docks here, it's beautifully restored. They've got some lovely bars and restaurants. You get the old super yacht that moors up in there. Underneath all these buildings, there's a shopping centre of about 350 shops. So there's got to be one good one. And then also here on the left, you've got the Docklands Museum. A little known museum compared to some of the other ones in the city, but it's a brilliant museum. It's just on your left hand side there at Canary Wharf, the Docklands Museum. Now a bit more about the river. So I said earlier that the length of the Thames is 215 miles, and the source of the river is in Gloucestershire, in the west of England, in the Cotswold Hills. And the river travels across southern England, in generally an easterly direction, and it drains in the North Sea, which is about 30 miles to the east of us from here. We have just turned though, we are currently heading south now, and that's because we are going to be travelling around a bend in the river on your left hand side, a big bend in the river here. And there's a few names for this part of London on your left and ahead of us on the left. The first of which is the Isle of Dogs. Anyone heard of the Isle of Dogs? Yeah. So it got that name during the time of Henry VIII. This bend in the river on your left was a marshland. At high water, it would get cut off, hence the island part. But it's actually where Henry VIII kept his hunting dogs. So when the sailors travelled around the bend in the river, they could hear the dogs barking, coined the phrase Isle of Dogs, and it's stuck ever since. Another name for this part of London to your left is Millwall. Who's heard of Millwall? Yeah, famous football team, of course, in the East End of London. Now, it got the name Millwall when they wanted to use this land to drain the marshlands here. They actually constructed mills on the wall of the river to pump the water out. Later, the mills were used for making flour. But the football team were formed here on your left-hand side in the 1880s. And they were formed by the dockers that used to work in this part of the city. Now, a lot of them originally were from Scotland, and that is why today the football team wear Scottish navy blue and a single lion for their badges to commemorate their Scottish heritage. The football ground's actually on your right-hand side somewhere today, but it was formed here in Millwall on your left. Now keep your eyes peeled for wildlife. This may surprise you to hear. The River Thames is home to around 150 marine species. So from fish to seabirds, freshwater birds, mammals. So we get a lot of seals in the river. We also get porpoises and occasionally the odd lost dolphin. So keep your eyes peeled. We did have a dolphin down at Greenwich the other week actually. Now it's a mixture of salt water brought in from the tides and fresh water coming downriver. It's known as brackish water, and it gives you a varied amount of species. It's a lot cleaner than you think, this river. Okay, to look at it looks pretty dirty, doesn't it? But that is mainly because of the strength of the tides. It churns up that riverbed underneath us and gives it that muddy, murky look. So it is a lot cleaner than you think, this river. I still wouldn't drink the water though, if I was you. Now, for the next 5 minutes, I'm going to give your ears a rest and let you enjoy the sunshine for a minute. When we get a bit closer to Greenwich, I will tell you all about Greenwich. There's a lot to see and do there. It's a beautiful part of the city. So in the meantime though, just sit back, relax. I will speak to you again in about 5 minutes. Excellent. Deptford, that's to the right of the bridge, and the Royal Borough of Greenwich, which is to the left of that bridge. So we're just entering Greenwich now. Now, Deptford actually means deep fall, and that's because this is actually a really deep part of the river here. So we're about to pass some yellow mooring buoys you'll see on your right-hand side. So we can get cruise ships mooring up to these. So deep drafted ocean-going vessels are able to moor up here. At low water, there's still around 9 metres of depth here, a really deep part of the river here. So that's hence the name Deptford. So we are now entering Greenwich, and our destination is Maritime Greenwich, which is ahead of us. And Maritime Greenwich is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. There is a lot to see and do. I will point a number of things out for you. So you can see the tall ship there, the 3 masts of the Cutty Sark. Now that was a tea clipper. Tea clippers were designed for speed because the British needed their tea very quickly. At top speed, the Cutty Sark could do about 26 knots. Take it from me, that is very quick. Okay, so we've just come down with 2 engines, admittedly against the tide, but we've done about 8 knots coming down. So that gives you a rough idea of how quick that was for a ship. It was actually mostly involved in the wool trade between Australia and Britain, and it set the fastest time back from Australia under sail at 66 days. It's a beautifully restored museum today, I should point out. Now, beyond the Cutty Sark, at the top of the hill, that's Greenwich Park, where you see the tree line beyond it. And just to the right of the ship, you'll see a green dome and a sort of red brick castle-like building just to the right of the Cutty Sark. That is the Royal Observatory and Greenwich Park. Royal Observatory and Flamstead House at the top of Greenwich Park. From our pier, it's about a 15-20 minute walk to get to the top. I recommend it, okay? You get absolutely amazing views of London. In my opinion, better views than the London Eye. So it's worth it. But you can also go up there and you can step 1 foot in the Western Hemisphere, 1 foot in the Eastern Hemisphere, and you will not feel a thing. East meets west, yeah? So the meridian runs through this part of the city. Around the bend, that's the North Greenwich Peninsula, and it pretty much goes through there and then up the hill. So we're just about in the Western Hemisphere at the moment. Those white buildings straight ahead of us with the 2 domes there, that is the old nautical colleges. That's worth a visit. So open to the public there, you've got the Queen's House, the Painted Hall, and the National Maritime Museum. So they're beautiful buildings. There is a lot of food and drink options here. There's over 50 pubs and restaurants. You've got all the sort of chain restaurants you'd expect to find. The Greenwich Market is about a 2-minute walk from our pier, just up the road. And you'll also be able to find all your sort of traditional East End food here as well, like your pie, mash and liquor if you fancy or something like that. So lots of options for there. Now travel information for you. Our departure time is 1:50, 10 to 2. So the crew have a bit of a break here, and then we turn around and we head back. There are boats every 40 minutes today, okay? So lots more boats today. The last boat to leave here this evening is 10.
Yeah.